Okay, let's dive in. We've got this set of sources, articles, notes, some reports about these really terrible events in Minnesota recently.
Yeah, very serious. Targeted violence against lawmakers is heavy stuff.
It really is. So our job here, like always on the deep dive, is to take your sources, the stuff you've pulled together, and really dig into them.
Find those key insights, the important facts, maybe things that aren't immediately obvious.
Exactly. So you can get up to speed quickly on something that, frankly, has huge implications.
And the sources you've given us for this one, well, they focus on a topic of immense gravity, no doubt about it, detailing these specific acts.
Yeah, understanding the documented details is just crucial here.
Absolutely. These sources provide a pretty detailed picture.
So let's be clear about the focus. This deep dive is all about the June 14th, 2025 shootings targeting Minnesota lawmakers.
Right. The sources describe the assassination, and they use that word of State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark.
Tragically, yes. And also the attempted assassination of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette.
So, based on this material, you've got the articles, reports, all that. We're going to try and walk you through how the incident is described.
Uh-huh. Look at who the victims were, based on these profiles.
Yeah, what the sources tell us about the suspect, the investigation, the findings so far.
And the potential motives, because that's a big part of it in the reports.
Definitely. And then, sort of the bigger picture, the implications of this specific kind of political violence. We're sticking to what's documented right here in these sources.
Okay, let's start with the events themselves. June 14th. The sources describe it as, well, rapid. Coordinated attacks, early morning.
They do. The timeline they lay out is quite specific. It's between about 2 a.m. and 3:35 a.m. Central Daylight Time.
CDT, right.
Two separate attacks. First, Senator Hoffman's home in Champlin, then Representative Hortman's home in Brooklyn Park.
And the sources point out these places are only, what, 9 miles apart?
About that, yeah. Which really highlights, the planning. It wasn't random. It seems deliberately spread out.
And the initial reports cited in these sources identified the victims. Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark, killed.
And Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, injured. The sources are also quick to note they're all DFL members.
Right, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, Minnesota's Democratic affiliate.
And the police response timeline is a really key piece here in the sources. The first call came in around 2 a.m. from the Hoffman place in Champlin.
Okay.
Officers respond there, find the Hoffmans injured, and then, crucially, they make what the sources call a proactive decision.
Check on Representative Hortman.
Exactly. They head over to her place in Brooklyn Park, arriving around 3:35 a.m., and this proactive check, it's critical. It leads right to the suspect.
And what happened next, according to these sources, is just stunning. Officers get to Hortman's house and find someone dressed like a cop.
Yeah, actually exiting the house. And this person is later identified as Vance Boelter.
And get this, there's a vehicle in the driveway set up to look like a police SUV. Lights. Even a police license plate.
A fake one, obviously, but convincing. And that's where the confrontation happens. The sources say Boelter opened fire on the officers.
Wow.
He then went back into the house for a bit before fleeing on foot.
But the investigation got a massive break right then and there, didn't it? In that fake police car.
Huge. The reports mention this repeatedly. They found a manifesto, an extensive target list, and these flyers saying, "No kings."
No kings. Okay.
And the sources are really clear this evidence was immediately significant. It pointed straight away to a premeditated ideological motive.
And it led them to identify Vance Boelter, 57, as the main suspect really fast.
Exactly. Swift identification.
So this whole sequence just laid out in the sources.
Yeah.
The calculation, the police impersonation, targeting officials at home. It feels like a direct assault.
It is. On democratic institutions, public safety itself, it's the
Yeah.
kind of thing that, shakes everyone's sense of security,
Yeah.
highlights a real vulnerability.
Absolutely, a profound one.
Yeah, it forces you to confront that.
Okay, let's shift focus to the victims. The sources make it very clear these weren't random. These were prominent people. Their selection has weight.
And the profiles in the sources are quite detailed, especially for Melissa Hortman, born May 27, 1970, Fridley, Minnesota.
Comes across as having this incredible path of public service.
Right. Boston University, University of Minnesota Law, then a master's from Harvard Kennedy School. Pretty impressive background.
And her early work, mentioned in the source's legal aid attorney, got a record housing discrimination award back then, served on the Brooklyn Park Human Relations Commission.
Seems like it really set the stage for her political career.
Which was, well, extensive, as the sources detail. Minnesota House Rep from 2005 right up until her death.
Held different leadership roles, but the big one was Speaker of the House, the 61st Speaker from 2019 to 2025.
First woman in that role in over 25 years, the sources note. And she was the DFL leader in the House when she died.
She's described again and again in these reports as a DFL trailblazer. Really effective.
They list some major achievements under her leadership: universal free school meals, codifying abortion rights in state law.
Big environmental laws, too. She was chief author on solar energy stuff, transportation funding, education, equity initiatives.
And nationally known for energy policy expertise, according to these reports.
And the quotes from colleagues, they're powerful, from both sides of the aisle, the sources say.
Yeah, things like a bright shining light, smart, savvy, strategic, kind, funny, brave, determined.
Someone called her indisputably the most consequential and impactful speaker in state history. That's quite a statement.
They also mentioned her unflappable and unabashed tough streak, referencing that viral speech from 2017.
And her personal philosophy, captured in that quote, "To whom much is given, much is expected," really sums up that dedication.
It's just incredibly tragic reading about her husband, too, Mark Hortman, 58, also killed at their home.
Yeah, the sources say he was found right at the threshold, hit by gunfire, and died later in the hospital. Multiple gunshot wounds.
They had 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Had just been at a fundraiser together the night before.
Awful. Just awful. Then there's Senator John Hoffman, 60, and his wife Yvette. The attack at their place in Champlin. Both shot multiple times.
The report said they had surgery, stable condition. Officials were expressing cautious optimism for recovery.
Yeah, from what Governor Walz explicitly called an assassination attempt.
And Senator Hoffman's role is detailed too. DFL senator since 2012, chairs the Human Services Committee.
His record, as described, includes supporting health programs for undocumented immigrants, bills for people with disabilities, progressive policies.
And that detail about Yvette Hoffman reportedly throwing herself in front of their daughter during the attack.
Just harrowing. Speaks volumes about what they went through.
So when you look at these profiles, the sources really emphasize that targeting top leaders like the speaker, a committee chair, in their homes,
with their families,
it exposes this deep vulnerability for public servants. It raises huge questions documented right here about their security, the risks they take.
Especially in today's, very polarized climate. It forces us to think about the personal cost.
Yeah, the personal cost of public service. Now, the suspect, Vance Boelter, 57. The sources put him at the center of the investigation. And his profile is, well, complex.
It really is,
Yeah.
Physically. White male, 6'1", 220 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes. Last seen wearing, a light cowboy hat, dark shirt jacket, light pants, dark bag.
But they think he changed clothes.
Oh.
And there's talk of a latex mask in surveillance photos.
That's what the reports suggest, yeah. A potential mask. His professional background is varied, too, according to the sources. Director of security patrols for one company. CEO of something called Red Lion Group, claimed international security experience there.
But also, regular manager jobs. 7-Eleven, Marathon Speedway.
And bigger names, too. Del Monte, Nestle Gerber, Johnsonville, general manager roles. A mix.
But here's the really notable thing the sources point out. The political connection.
Yeah, he served on the Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Council, a private sector rep.
Appointed by Governor Dayton, then reappointed by Governor Walz, served until 2023. Even vice chair for employment for people with disabilities.
So an official state board appointment, which raises questions about connections. Did he know Hoffman or Hortman personally?
The sources say it's unclear. Hoffman was on the same board. Hortman would have been at public meetings he might have attended. But a direct personal link isn't established in these reports.
His addresses are listed: a rural place in Sibley County and recently renting a room part-time in North Minneapolis.
And his last known movements tracked in the reports back to that Minneapolis place briefly around 6 a.m. on the 14th, just hours after the attacks.
And during that return, there's this really chilling detail shared in the sources. He apparently texted roommates.
What did it say?
Something like, "I made some bad choices. I may be dead soon." Which the sources present as this rare glimpse into his mindset right after.
Wow. And his current status is still at large.
At large, yes. Formally considered armed and dangerous. They recovered AK-style firearms from the fake police vehicle, but authorities believe he still has a pistol.
The contrast the sources highlight is so stark. Former political appointee, security professional, versus these alleged actions.
It's unsettling. It suggests, as discussed in the reports, maybe some hidden radicalization, or a really severe psychological break that just wasn't visible publicly.
And what that really shows, based on these sources, is how hard it can be to spot threats from people who seem, integrated, conventional even.
Makes threat assessment incredibly difficult.
So the investigation itself described as massive, multi-agency.
Oh, yeah. Brooklyn Park PD leading on the Hortman case, Champlin PD with the initial Hoffman response. But then the Minnesota BCA, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the FBI are heavily involved.
FBI involvement signals the national significance, right? High priority.
Absolutely. And Governor Walz activated the State Emergency Operations Center, too. Shows the level of response.
And that police impersonation aspect just keeps coming up as critical in the sources. The whole outfit, the fake car.
The blue shirt, black tactical vest, blue pants, the vehicle with lights, and the fake police plate, it's central to how this unfolded.
And the likely purpose, the sources explain, was to approach without suspicion, get close.
Exactly. Bypass security, catch people off guard. It's a tactic, unfortunately, seen in other targeted attacks.
And then that evidence from the vehicle, so crucial, the manifesto.
Outlining his ideology, as the reports describe it, and that extensive target list, over 50 individuals named.
Including out-of-state officials, abortion rights advocates, facilities.
That's what the sources specify, yes. And those No Kings flyers linked explicitly to anti-administration protests.
The sources really stress how vital this evidence was. It established the political ideological motive almost immediately.
And showed the broader scope of his intent. Authorities acted fast based on that list to warn people, provide security, a necessary precaution.
The sources also mentioned the guns found in the car, AK-style firearms, though he's believed to still have a handgun.
And evidence at the scene, like multiple bullet holes at the Hoffman house, confirms firearms were used.
That surveillance photo with the cowboy hat, noted as key for public ID in the manhunt.
Definitely. And the efforts to catch him are ongoing, a major focus in the reports. FBI is offering up to $50,000 reward.
And the public warnings. Do not approach him. Armed and dangerous.
Yeah, they're providing tip line info constantly. Call 911, the BCA line 877-996-6222, or email bca.tips@state.mn.us.
So when you put it all together, the tactical elements, the disguise, the guns, plus the ideological stuff, manifesto, list, flyers.
It really points towards something with the characteristics of domestic terrorism, as the sources suggest. More than just a crime, a national security concern, hence the FBI's deep involvement.
Paints a picture of someone highly motivated with a plan that went way beyond just these two attacks.
Seems so. Let's dig into those motives a bit more, based on what's in the sources.
The sources seem pretty direct here. Governor Walz called it targeted political violence, a political assassination right away.
That characterization is highlighted repeatedly. The consensus among officials per the sources is that it was clearly politically motivated.
And those No Kings flyers are explicitly linked to motive in the reports, tied to anti-administration protests, suggest an anti-establishment, anti-authority driver.
Definitely one angle. And then the target list content, the focus on abortion rights advocates and abortion facilities, makes a fervent anti-abortion stance look like a specific central motive too, revealed in his own planning docs.
And you connect the victims to that. Melissa Hortman was a leader on abortion rights legislation. Senator Hoffman backed progressive policies.
Right. They fit the profile implied by the manifesto and list.
Even with that complexity of Boelter's past appointment.
Right.
Serving on that board with Hoffman.
The sources emphasize that the lack of a clear personal relationship combined with the manifesto and list strongly suggests they were targeted for their public positions and actions. Ideological selection, not personal grudge.
So the sources seem to be synthesizing these ideologies. Like a mix of anti-government, No Kings,
yeah,
and this specific anti-abortion anger.
Exactly. A dangerous combination. It's a pattern sometimes seen in domestic extremism, this mix of broad anti-establishment feelings and very specific single-issue grievances. The sources suggest this likely drove him from belief to violence.
What this whole thing illustrates so starkly, as portrayed in these sources, is how political polarization can just escalate into real violence.
It's a massive challenge for society, right? Addressing the roots of extremism without letting political talk itself become a trigger.
Raises really tough questions about that line between belief and action.
Critical question.
Okay, what about the current status? The manhunt, legal proceedings, what do the sources say now?
Well, the manhunt is ongoing, intensive. Hundreds of agents involved, multiple agencies, across Minnesota, maybe wider.
He's still at large, still considered armed and dangerous.
Yeah, authorities believe he's actively trying to evade capture, possibly get out of the Twin Cities area.
And no other arrests reported, right? Just the focus on finding Boelter.
Correct, as of the time of these reports. The FBI putting him on the most wanted list, offering that $50,000 reward, it just shows the priority.
We've seen statements quoted from officials across the spectrum, like former President Trump, vowing full prosecution once he's caught.
Indicating a unified stance on bringing him to justice. And the sources note, practically speaking, legal proceedings only start once he's apprehended.
So the ongoing manhunt, as described, really highlights how tough it is to catch someone like this, armed, evasive.
And the persistent threat he poses until caught. Those public advisories show the tightrope authorities walk, needing public help, but managing fear, ensuring safety.
It's a complex, huge operation. Public safety first.
Absolutely.
And finally, the broader impact, the reactions, what's documented there.
Shockwaves, basically.
Yeah.
Across Minnesota, nationally, immediate, widespread reactions detailed in the sources. Grief, unified condemnation from political figures.
Governor Walz calling it an unspeakable tragedy, political assassination. Ordered flags half-staff. Praised Hortman, formidable public servant, served with grace, compassion, tirelessness.
Senator Klobuchar's reaction is prominent, too. Heartbroken and horrified, called Hortman a true public servant, said it was an attack on everything we stand for as a democracy.
Adding that we have to refuse to be a country where anyone is silenced by threats or violence. Strong words.
Very. And other colleagues quoted, too, from both parties. Secretary of State Steve Simon, Republican leaders like Speaker DeMuth, former Rep. Garofalo, expressing sorrow, respect for Hortman's impact, even across divides. A moment of shared grief.
The sources also talk about the implications for Minnesota politics, that Minnesota nice image, but also rising tensions lately.
Yeah, a sharply divided legislature. The DFL majority had recently pushed through a significant liberal agenda: abortion rights, trans rights, paid leave, free school lunches, things that face strong opposition.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, the sources are clear. This forces a major rethink of security for elected officials, especially at home.
It has to. It's seen as this grave assault on the democratic process itself, protecting those who serve.
Nationally, the DNC chair is mentioned, linking it to extremism and political violence in the U.S.
And the sources place it within a disturbing pattern. They mention the congressional baseball shooting, the Nova Scotia attacks, which also involved police impersonation.
Right, that tactic again.
It underscores, the sources argue, this urgent need for a national conversation about de-escalating rhetoric, addressing the root causes.
What this whole case really challenges, reading these sources, is that fundamental idea of democracy, serving without fearing for your life or your families.
It absolutely highlights the increasing risks people face just by choosing public service today.
Okay, let's try to wrap this deep dive up. Summarize the core findings from this collection of sources you brought us.
Well, based on this material, it seems clear. June 14th was a profound, calculated act of targeted political violence.
And the motive seems unequivocally ideological, judging by the evidence described in the manifesto, list, flyers. Anti-establishment and anti-abortion sentiments seem key.
The attack itself appears sophisticated, premeditated the impersonation, the fake vehicle, the planning documents. It aligns with characteristics of domestic terrorism, according to these sources.
And it definitely exposes a critical, alarming vulnerability for public servants. Highlights that urgent need to reevaluate security, especially at home.
Yeah, and the ongoing manhunt for Boelter just underscores the persistent threat from individuals motivated by ideology to commit extreme violence.
Ultimately, the sources present this tragedy as just a stark, terrible illustration of how extreme political polarization can potentially spill over into real-world violence.
A sobering conclusion from the material.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a really difficult, important topic to unpack.
Indeed.
We hope that going through these sources together has maybe provided some clarity, some insight into the documented events and what they might mean.
And maybe, as you reflect on all this information we've discussed from the sources, here's something to think about. How does a society, how do we balance that essential need to protect public figures from this kind of violence, while still upholding the principles of accessibility, the public nature of democratic service, making sure leaders aren't totally cut off?
That's a tough one.
It really is. No easy answers, but it's a question brought sharply into focus by these tragic events we've examined today through these sources.
Something to definitely keep thinking about. Keep seeking information, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.